This episode is brought to you by CBS All Access. If you don't already subscribe to CBS All Access, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/CBS. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only. Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of the Star Trek Picard cast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Ruthie.
And tonight we'll be covering Season 1, Episode 6, titled The Impossible Box. But before we get started, we have feedback for last week's episode and podcast, Season 1, Episode 5, Stardust, City Rag. So let's open hailing frequencies. Well, first thing, we actually got this with Cyberman's voicemail, but I missed it. So I wanted to make sure that we read it this time around. So she says, "Oh my gosh, Brian and Ruthie, I just had a wild thought. Ever since the beginning of Picard, I thought that Utopia Planitia was destroyed by the Borg. But this is crazy town theory, but I cannot help thinking that since the Borg never defeated humanity and Janeway, well, they would go to extremes to defeat humanity, extremes like helping Maddox create sentient androids. Eek! Something is nagging me. Something I am missing. The end of sentient life might mean the Borg. I do not know how yet, but perhaps, arg, just throwing this out there. Do not need to include on the podcast. Just think about it. Well, I'm going to include it anyway. It's interesting thought." Then she says, "Arg, I am missing something. Well, tell us what it is."
Yeah. When you figure it out, let us know.
It's certainly possible that it could be the Borg that did it. I'm still trying to figure out what the secret is about the Zhat Vash and, what they told Girardi and some things that came up this week that we'll get into later on that also kind of fit into that whole narrative that I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how the pieces kind of fit together, but preview, I like this last episode a lot.
Me too.
Yeah. All right, next.
All right. We also missed last week Ken from Chicago on Twitter. He says, episode 5 starts out cringy, but make it through that, and it more than makes up for it in the middle straight through the end. Best episode since the debut, and arguably better than the premiere. MVP, 7 of 9. So if you do the right thing for the wrong reasons, does that negate the rightness of your actions? Or does it merely negate the rightness of praising you for taking such actions? If I donate to a charity only for PR, is it, quote, good? Borg parts are valuable because they are advanced alien technology. One Borg cube nearly conquered Earth. Number 1's appearance was hyped a lot, and she had more than one appearance in Discovery Season 2.
Okay.
I'm not sure what to go with that. Okay, great.
My take on that one question, it is good if you donate to charity, even though it's PR because you're donating to charity.
Right. You're doing it for the wrong reasons, but good is still happening.
Right.
So there you go. I think the argument is, how do the Fenris Rangers get to be judge, jury, and executioner? Aside from murder/execution, Seven stopped Bjayzl from continuing to kill ex-Borg. Dr. Girardi directed the Daystrom Institute. She's an expert in reprogramming AIs.
Yeah, and I have more to say about that this week. So, that last part. And I don't know. Miss Vijay there wasn't the greatest person. So, but,
No,
that
I don't know. I kind of feel like this is a Judge Dredd situation where it's like, we know you're doing wrong, so here's your sentence.
Yeah, I think Judge Dredd, that's a good comparison for this.
I mean, what are you? There's not really a legal system set in place for such things. So it's that, or it's like the Wild Wild West kind of a thing where everybody's a gunslinger, I guess, or something. I don't know. But
yeah.
So anyway, yerp. That's what I have to say about that.
Faithful Chicky is next. She says, just a quick question. Does anyone have a guess as to what happened to Chakotay? And when we see Seven again, she has to come back and join #Picard, right? Please. And then she says at CBS All Access at Picardcast, which we don't know again if it's us or not. I don't know.
I assume it's us. If she's doing at Picardcast, that's us.
Yeah.
But she might think that it's an official thing. I don't know why you would, though, because it's Picardcast. That's nothing to do. Anyway, I don't know. I'm assuming it's us. She's talking to us. And Faithful Checky, we don't have any idea. Except now I do, because of what I watched on the Ready Room. But we don't have any influence. So.
Yes. If you are listening, Faithful Chicky, I would recommend you watch the Ready Room this week.
Yes.
That's a little hint. Rita Maria 2003 from Twitter says, please, the participation of Jerry Ryan in Star Trek Picard was epic. How about a spin-off of Seven of Nine as a ranger in Fenris? It would be cool. And I included this reply, which I wouldn't normally do, but I wanted to address this one thing. At Sports Trek TNG responds, and they say, I agree. Number one, make it so. Engage. And I wanted to highlight this one because they have made, such a big deal about him saying number one and saying engage, but we still haven't heard make it so. And as far as I'm concerned, I remember Picard saying make it so more than engage, because we've heard other captains say engage, but we've only ever maybe heard Riker say make it so, but only one time. So to me, make it so is the phrase that I want to hear Picard say, not engage.
Right. I mean, engage is kind of like, he only really said that when
we're going to warp.
Warp 5, engage.
Yeah.
But otherwise, every time something was going on, it was make it so, make it so,
right.
Make it so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So writers, get on that.
Yeah, that's right. We know you're listening.
Season 2.
Season 2, make it so. It's such a helpful.
We got one more. This came in just before we started tonight, and it's from Twitter.
What do you think?
Why would you waste your money on that?
No! The line must be drawn here! This far, no further! Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough! Shut up, Wesley!
That was a video sent to us from Worst Games Ever, and it was called Parenting Picard Style. And so we'll forward that in the Facebook group, but it's basically a video, so it's pretty funny. I don't know if that's something they did or if that's
something they found.
Yeah, but whatever it is, it's them, or I don't know. It could be them, but it was something directed directly at us. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is funny.
Yeah. I don't know how much of a translation it is without watching the video, but it's pretty funny. Parenting Picard Style. All right. Next.
All righty. Next, we have Todd from Ohio. This is still from last week, who says, okay, first we need to pour one out for Icheb. R.I.P. That was rough. I thought Picard's weird character for the heist, or whatever you call it, was ridiculously over the top, but in a weirdly good way. I was somehow spoiled about Jurati being a spy for the Romulans, but I don't know where they had gotten that from. And when I saw the twist with Maddox in this one, I was still like, thinking I fell asleep or missed a scene last week because I really don't understand why the twist. And I really didn't hear any of the dialogue except Bruce saying Aggie over and over again. So I still don't know what that was about. The actor playing Rafi's son looked familiar. What's he from? Is his pregnant wife a Vulcan or Romulan? Because that could be important. Aside from me being spoiled, it was a really great episode where a lot happened. The action is taking off now.
That it is.
Yeah, I say she's definitely, or you said she's definitely a Romulan.
Yeah.
And I agreed with you emphatically.
Yeah. One thing I noticed is, much like, we've seen these Romulans with accents, his wife had an accent that made her sound Indian or, South Asian, whatever you would call it. But it was of that area of the world. That's what I heard. She only said a few words, but I did kind of pick that up. So I was curious about that. One thing I can say, Rafi's son, and his last name was Wang, Gabriel Huang, with a Hwang, is played by Mason Gooding, who is the son of Cuba Gooding Jr. or Cuba. I think he goes by Cuba, doesn't he? Anyway.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not more helpful.
Well, anyway.
But yeah, that's definitely why he looks familiar.
Yeah. Once I realized that and I, looked at his face and looked at his father's face, I'm like, yeah, I can see resemblance there. So maybe it's that. I don't know what else he's been in, but so I didn't look him up on IMDb, but yeah, so that's him. All right. Next is Donna from Florida. She says, okay, questions. Did they infer that Seven and Bjayzl had a romantic relationship? I was getting that vibe. Also, Agnes, an intelligent scientist, blindly believes Commodore O and offs her boyfriend without hearing him out. I guess these are no's. Yeah, I kind of knows. Seven and Bjayzl, I got that vibe as well. And I know some other people did as well, just reading some things online. It was implied, but it wasn't stated as such. The fact of the matter is, I think that they had a close relationship. Whether or not it was romantic, I don't know. And yeah, I still wonder about that whole thing with Agnes and Commodore O, especially after this week. So.
Okie dokie.
Next,
we have James the Augmented Sailor, who says, you mean I can't call you guys BM and RR anymore? They're just terms of endearment, BM and RR. Okay, I'll stop. Ruthie, you're right. Calling Picard perfect on TNG is the wrong way to put things. #Ruthie's right. I think what I more mean to say is that he really comes off as larger than life, and that kind of puts him on a pedestal. In this show, he just seems more grounded and human. It no longer takes him the length of an episode or two to bounce back from something negative happening to him. Sure, he carried some baggage through TNG after being assimilated and such, but we never really saw it affect his ability to command. Does that make sense?
Well, I think a lot of that had to do with the episodic nature of TNG. Like in later seasons, I think it probably started a little bit with Picard getting assimilated and maybe Worf's story arc. They got better at doing a continuing story arc, but that wasn't something they did way back in like season 3 and even had just started in early season 4. It would have made for a better show, I think, if we had seen Picard suffer from the effects of the assimilation, besides that one episode, really, because we see him in Family and then it comes up again on the DS9 pilot. But other than that, not really any other time. Maybe a little bit during Borg, but aside from that, not really.
All right, he goes on to say, you guys don't think that the Zhat Vash team at the chateau couldn't be a suicide squad? I really do. Think about it. These guys have knowledge of something that knowing can drive one insane. There's also the whole destroyer mythos. To me, they fit the very definition of extremists. Being a veteran, I've seen some of this in action. Here's the thing. If you're willing to kill yourself with the acidic cyanide capsule, then it's not going to be too much farther a stretch to make a suicide run to further their cause. It may not have been what they were going for here, but they haven't said either way, and to me, it would make perfect sense. We can agree to disagree on that one.
Well, I'd have to go back and listen to see how much I disagreed with that assessment, but I wouldn't disagree with you now, James. I mean, I get that, like, it may seem insane that they'd be willing to die over these things, but I mean, people do that in certain times, and there's definitely been examples like in the last, 75, 80 years, like in World War II and with the terrorist bombings and stuff like that. Like, people go to their deaths, so it's possible. Especially like you said in the pilot episode and in episode 3 at the chateau, they were definitely going in there to kill themselves. So I think it was more Ruthie's thing.
It was. And
okay.
I am okay with saying that because I just wholeheartedly don't understand suicide bombers or people who go on suicide missions, I guess, or whatever. I don't know. I just don't understand it. So
yeah, my
go-to is always, is that written? I just don't. I mean, I'm sure I understand that there are people who don't. I don't know. I'm not explaining myself very well. The drive to survive is strong in most people. So, I mean, what's that called? Survival instinct.
Yeah,
is really strong in most people. So, I guess I just can't understand the willingness to give up the only thing that you really have. That's your life.
Yeah.
For what exactly? Someone else's cause? I don't know.
It does seem like an illogical thing, but
totally. But they're not Vulcans, so there you go.
Illogical.
Yeah, that's why I think. Okay, so James continues. He says, Ruthie, you brought up that Rafi's son sent her off, but probably hoped that she wouldn't leave. I have to disagree with you on that one. I have a parent like that. I won't say which one. And the addictions in this person's life caused a great deal of hardship on a few marriages, my brother, sister, and I growing up. It continued on even in my adult life to the point that I wouldn't talk to them for a few years. The relationship is still very strained to this day. I can only tolerate so much of this parent, and our relationship is currently limited to Facebook and, on a rare occasion, the phone. Addiction can be a very ugly and horrible thing. I've got some stories that I won't go into here, but I can relate to Rafi's son with that. Not to say that Rafi was as bad as mine was. It hasn't really been delved into on the show. I'm just saying that it is possible to damage a relationship with a child to that point. I think I said something back to him, and I can't.
I mean, I have some insight on this, not firsthand, but I know that some people that are loved ones of mine have some strained relationships with their parents. So I've seen that, as a witness, not as someone that was affected by that.
Yeah.
I had a good relationship with my parents, but they're both passed on.
Well, I think what I meant to express was not necessarily that her son probably hoped that she would stay, but more that she gave up really easily. Like you say, we don't know whether or not he hoped she would stay, but, we don't know, like you just said, we don't know what's going on with their relationship. But based on that, if it were me and I was mad at a parent who let me down, I might be a little swayed if my parent were persistent enough to not give up after one no. But since this isn't a Rafi Gabe story, of course she left. But anyway, I just wish there were more. I feel like I'm getting a whole bunch of teases on this show, and I need more explanations, more background, more reasons, just more. But anyway, yeah, if I said that Rafi's son hoped that she stayed, that's not exactly what I meant. I meant I felt like she gave up easily.
Right.
But, anyway. All right. Moving on again with James. He says, on a lighter note, I totally needed to proofread my feedback better. I accidentally said, I hope they abandon the 7 Bejazel, I couldn't remember her name when I wrote it, but I knew there was a J in there somewhere, plotline. What I meant to say was I hope they don't abandon it. It's got my interest piqued and raised a lot of questions. By the way, I'm with LT. All this eye stuff in Disco and Picard. I mean, seriously, I'm watching Disco right now, and I totally forgot that Lorca's eye treatment thingamadoo was also with a damn needle. They've got the same kind of fetish with eyes that Star Wars has with hands. Anyway, great cast as always, Brian and Ruthie. Just lighten up on the acting, will ya? LOL. Ugh, James, don't start with that.
Yes, you're going to trigger Ruthie. Don't do that.
Ay.
Derek from Ireland is next. He says, one little Easter egg that I noticed in Rios getting Seven's name wrong. He first calls her 99 from 60s spy comedy Get Smart, and then 11 from Stranger Things, two strong female characters with numbers for names. I just thought it was a nice meta touch, so I added it to trivia on IMDb for the episode. Yeah, that was a really good catch, and when I listened to, Derek also does a Picard podcast called the Star Trek Picard podcast on TV Podcast Industries. I think we've mentioned it before. And I recommend their podcasts actually because they come up with some insights sometimes that we don't. So, and this was one of them. I heard it last week and yeah, there's a good catch there. 99. I didn't even think of 99 from Get Smart. But 11 I did, but I didn't end up saying anything last week, so.
Yeah, I remembered that he said 11, but I wasn't necessarily putting 11/99 together as two other strong female characters with numbers for names. But kudos to you, Derek.
Yeah.
All right. Next, from last week, still, we have Brian from Hawaii, who says, I listened to the new Patreon episode number 3 today, great discussion, and also to the Trek FM Patron Roundtable episode number 62 that you were on. Regarding the latter, thanks so much for representing the viewpoint, lamenting the new Trek series TVMA ratings with adult content, violence, and explicit language.
Yeah, and something I noticed this week, it was not TVMA, it was TV14. So
there you go.
Yeah. To me, I think that's a good rating to go with. I don't think it needs... I don't know. My take on it is that they stabbed themselves just a little bit by, not going for the wider demographic. I don't think they need to make it adult. Star Trek has this history with parents sharing it with their children, and I want to see that continue, and I think that it makes it like a show that all ages can watch, and I think that grows the community, that grows Star Trek fans. And if you can't show it to your kid until they're older, I think that kind of cools off the demand for it. So I think that they should they can get mature, but you don't have to forget the history of Star Trek. And to me, that's part of the history of Star Trek.
Yeah. I feel like this is probably just because this episode was that way, not because they made a turn. So I'm sure we'll see it again next week, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think that they made a turn, but the thing is, this isn't Westworld, right? So I don't think that they should be trying to make Westworld. They should try to make Star Trek and make it up to date, but don't forget the history of it. That's all. So
I agree. I think I said it a million times. I'm sure I sound like a broken record. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
They're focusing on the wrong things that being on a streaming service allows them to do. This episode, however, they flipped that. They made it longer and they didn't have any gross swear words.
I knew you would like that.
Yep, I was cool. I was excited. I was like, yay!
Yeah,
I'm watching, I just mentioned to Brian before we started recording that I've been rewatching season 1 of Altered Carbon, and nearly every episode of that show is super long. I mean, at least I don't know. I mean, I can't say at least, but they all seem like they're like an hour or something, which is more than would be if they were being shown on a network TV thing or whatever instead of streaming. Or I mean, HBO shows do that a lot. A lot of other cable network shows that air on cable TV networks. Gosh, I can't talk. Do not necessarily stick to the 42-minute time slot thing, but most of the shows that air on the big four have that time slot that they stick to religiously. Gotta get those ad dollars.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like AMC, they didn't do it always, but like the last, I'd say like 4 seasons, I guess, of Walking Dead, they've been playing a lot where it goes past the 10 o'clock hour, and sometimes it's like 90 minutes. And then the same goes for Fear the Walking Dead, although not as much. And I know they do it a lot with Better Call Saul.
Yeah, they do it with The Magicians on Sci-Fi Channel. They also do it they used to do it with Mr. Robot on USA.
Yeah.
Just a lot of shows that are on cable channels aren't married to that particular time slot. So,
but one thing, and I brought this up in the Patreon call, but one thing that I noticed last week in the cold open, when Seven, puts Icheb out of his misery, she's holding Icheb, hugging him, and she shoots the phaser into him directly. And the odd thing about that is it's not like a projectile gun like would be used today. It's an energy weapon. So how come she's not affected at all by the energy discharge of that weapon, especially being at that close range? Any thoughts about that?
Nope.
Okay.
I know you've been aching to say it since last week. So
I know.
You did. There you go.
There, I got it off my chest.
I wouldn't let him add it in last week. I was like, too late. Oh my goodness. I just wanted to give a special shout out to Doug Payton for the awesome lyrics that he wrote for us, set to the tune of the song, the theme song for Enterprise in our Facebook group. It was awesome. Thanks, Doug. You're the best.
Yeah, we're not gonna actually.
Well, I'm not singing.
No. Although you have.
I have, but I'm not singing right now.
Yeah.
Oh my.
All
goodness.
right. So let's move on. So season 1, episode 6, titled "The Impossible Box," written by executive story editor Nick Zayas and directed by Maya Vervillo. The description from CBS.com: Picard and the crew track Soji to the Borg cube in Romulan space, resurfacing haunting memories for Picard. Meanwhile, Narek, and we heard both pronunciations this week, by the way, Narek and Narek.
Yeah, I did notice that. I was like, okay, so Soji is the only one who calls him Narek. But because she's the only one who's been around, that's the only pronunciation that we've heard.
I
so
think the sister calls him Narek, too.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
In any case, somebody else said Narek.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Narek believes he finally found a way to safely exploit Soji for information. And that's TV 14 with violence, and the air date, again, it aired a little early, February 26, 2020, and I happened to see it at 2:09 a.m. this week. So that's 11:09 p.m. Pacific time. So I guess technically it did make the 26.
There's no way that I could ever be up that late to watch that show and have it make any kind of impression on me.
Okay.
Like, I know that it's available while I'm asleep, but I'm dead to the world.
So for Spot the 47, it's all the 47s in Soji's room. 47 months, 47 months, 47 months.
I think you meant 37.
What? It was 37 months, not 40.
30,
oh, man.
37 months.
But okay, 37 months. but there were 10 of them. She said 37 10 times. So 37 plus 10 makes 47.
Oh my gosh. I can't even say that line because you know I didn't count them.
Well,
not make
okay.
any sense. No one would ever believe me.
I know.
Oh, Brian.
My little comedy skit is failing. But
It's a valiant effort.
it's a valiant effort. But the next thing we were going to say is, oh, only 8 of them, because, I counted, because, that's me. So then I would say, well, well, never mind.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. But what about the calls to mom? They were 47
Those were
seconds.
70 seconds.
Oh, but what about Soji's employee number? 74983-2. Ah. So,
oh my god.
And adding all to that, there was something about like 48 hours mentioned on the intercom. So yet again, no direct 47, and I didn't see any on screen, although I did look a little bit. So again, no big flashing 47s. The only 47s that we've seen, and we did get one last week that I didn't mention, because there was one when Rafi was looking up Gabe's like information, and there was a 47 on that screen, but it was like, again, a really small thing. So they're really making us work for it. So yet again, I'm going to have to freeze frame trying to find
blow
47.
up the screen.
Yep. So anyway, yeah, that's where we're at. All right. So Ruthie, what did you think of the Impossible Box? And are you going to give it another arbitrary rating, or is it going to be an actual thought out rating this time?
I always give arbitrary ratings. And you know why? I'll tell you
chicken,
why.
That's why.
No, I'm not chicken.
Okay.
It's because I can't compare all the TV that I've ever seen in the world and come up with a rating. I can't do that. And I also can't remember from this episode all the way back to episode 1, that was 5 episodes ago, which one I liked better, and remember, okay, so I gave that episode a this rating, so this one has to be more/less than that. Then I would have to go back and readjust all my previous ratings. So that's why all of my ratings are arbitrary.
So what you're saying is that I am a combination of Rafi and a synth.
Sure.
Because I'm obsessed about it. Plus,
you're obsessed with numbers and ratings.
yes,
I'm not.
well, I am. Yes. Anyway,
there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying I don't operate that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a statistician. I appreciate the episodes and I give them ratings as I feel when I'm watching them.
And I was a math major. I didn't end up getting a math degree. I switched into economics, which I still can't believe.
I was a French major until I switched to international and area studies. So there you go.
You probably have a better French accent than Picard does.
That is definitely true. I mean, I have a better French accent when I'm speaking French. I can't really do a good fake French accent when I'm speaking English.
Right.
Like a fake French English speaking accent. Whatever.
Well, anyway.
Okay, so my rating, which is the aforementioned arbitrary, is 9. I'm going to go with 7. 9.7. Huggable Hughes. Or Hugging Hughes. Or Hugh the Huggers. Because he was hugging. And it was adorable. I liked it. I liked that scene. It was fun. I liked it.
Well, I'm going to give this one probably age 37 months out of 38, which roughly works out to 9.7 out of 10 also.
Yay! Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, I knew that none of those 37s were 47s. I'm not deranged.
Aww.
However, there were some things that I didn't like respect to the rest of the season so far. It was, I would say, errors of omission in this episode. So if I rated it like with respect to the rest of the season, this episode wouldn't go down, but maybe some of the previous episodes would go down a little bit for things that were not followed up upon. That should have been.
That's why my episode ratings are arbitrary.
All right. Listener ratings?
Okay, Fred from the Netherlands gives us our only 47 out of 52, which is approximately 9 out of 10 friends that probably won't choose to live. And that is a prediction.
Brian from Hawaii gives it 9.75 sleepy mom AIs or Flaughter lunchboxes. Take your pick.
Huh. Not sure I know what a Flaughter lunchbox
I don't
is.
either. It might have been the lunchbox itself. I know that it had some kind of kitty thing on it, so maybe that's what it was. It's from Voyager.
Okay. All right, James the Augmented Sailor says the impossible box gets 9.6. I mean, you know, Picard, every part of that guy that's not ego is rampaging id.
I got a kick out of that.
I know, that was funny. Especially the look he gave her.
Edwin from Arizona says 8.6, where's the kid?
All right, Wes from Minneapolis says 9.1, Hugh reunions out of 10.
Jim from Florida says 9.5. Welcome home, Locutus.
All right. Stephen from the UK says 9.975. Killer Rubik's Cubes.
In more ways than one. Alex from New Jersey says, wow, best episode yet. 9 out of 10. Queen Bee Transporters.
Steve from OKC says 9 out of 10. Thank Hughes, or we can remember it for you wholesale. Total Recall.
Yeah, that's the name of the story that Total Recall was based on. I recognize that. LT from NC says, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Letting in the round ears.
Rick from Cleveland says, another great episode that moves the story forward. I rate it 249 years of Romulan bad moods out of 250.
I like that.
That's good. That's good.
All right, we have our yeses.
Yes!
Fred has some visual yeses. He says, young Soji peeking through the door of her father's lab. Several of the Elnor, Agnes, and Narissa close-ups. Yeah, I agree with that. Locutus projected over Picard. Yes, actually, that was brilliant, which was similar to one from a couple of episodes back with, what's her name, Ramda and
Soji.
Soji being superimposed. Yeah, I really liked that one with Picard. Long shot inside La Serena with Rios playing ball. Sarek's room in a fisheye lens view.
Narek's room.
What did I say? Sarek?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to leave that in because it's funny. Narek's room in a fisheye lens view. Several shots of Rafi trying to convince Emmy to give an official letter of credence. Picard arriving in the Borg cube. Several camera angles with all the Borg regeneration chambers. Soji and Narek entering the Jean-Luc room. Young Soji reflected in the rainy window, and Picard and Soji stepping through the spatial trajector.
I agree. Those were great.
Yeah, it's a very visually striking episode this time around. Actually, all have been, but I think this one especially had some brilliant camera shots.
They usually are.
Yeah.
Next, we have Brian from Hawaii who says, finally, a longer episode over 50 minutes in length. The holographic overlay of Locutus over Picard was a powerful effect. Rafi really hit it out of the park with her performance on this one, and I liked the tenderness Rios showed toward her. The Hugh Picard reunion made me happy, including Picard's Borg flashbacks and realization that the XBs are really victims. The Sicarian spatial trajectory portal in the Borg Queen room was a nice Easter egg back to Voyager 2.
Yes, it was. And when it comes to the 50-minute thing, I have to say, Yeah, it was long overdue. And this was a good episode to make longer, too, because it was a lot to go through. And a lot happened, and it was all really good. James the Augmented Sailor says, Soji's revelation and activation. The meditation room was an interesting choice, and I thought a good contrast to the rest of the artifact. We also got clear indication now that Maddox integrated Borg tech into Dodge and Soji's creation. The knowledge of the hidden Borg thingamadoo in the Queen's cell is clear evidence of that.
That's an excellent point, James.
Do you understand that? Because that's going way over me.
When she says, so Hugh and Picard are talking about it can, I don't know, portal you, beam you, whatever, traject you 40,000 light years, she finishes that sentence.
That's the evidence?
That is to me. Why would she know that?
I don't know. She seemed to know a lot of things. That's something
that, well, yeah, but to me, that's also evidence of Borg technology because she knows things that she really shouldn't. And the Borg have assimilated so much that the only way that she could have that knowledge, I think, is if she is if she's an AI that can retain that knowledge, and B, she has that knowledge from the Borg. But to me, I feel like that's a direct light bulb on it because Picard and Hugh are talking about that chamber and saying you have a memory of it even though you've never been here. And that's because of the Borg thing. Mm-hmm. Well, they aren't AIs. They're not androids. They don't have that kind of a brain. They don't have that kind of perfect recall. So to them, it's just kind of a fuzzy deja vu kind of a thing. Like I feel like a familiarity. Like I feel like I've been here before. Why is this familiar to me? Well, it's familiar to them because of the memories they have from being Borg. Uh-huh. Whereas Soji, she wouldn't have any. The only reason to me that she would have knowledge of this is if she has Borg tech in her. And so, and because she is an AI, her brain works in such a way that she can just recall facts however, whenever she wants, just the same way that Data did. I mean, she's basically a computer. She's like a walking Google. All you have to do is ask her a question and she'll know the answer, even though she may not necessarily know why. She always says, oh, I read it somewhere.
Right.
That's what she always says. Her response is always, oh, I read it somewhere. But I don't think that's not knowledge that she would have gotten from Data. That's knowledge that she would have gotten from the Borg. So I think part of her knowledge is knowledge that she got from Data being, her being made from one of his memory engrams. And I think that particular knowledge to me shows that she has Borg tech in her because that's not knowledge she would have gotten from having one of his memory engrams.
Well, for that explanation,
not memory engram, whatever you call it. What do you call it? What do they call it? One of his neuronic something. What did they call it? What did they make her from? It wasn't a memory engram. It was a
neuron.
Yeah, one of his positronic
neurons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So when I said memory engram, what I meant was positronic neurons. But basically his memory engrams.
So maybe this is an explanation of what the destroyer is. Maybe an android that is made up of like Data plus Borg tech could end up with basically the ability to destroy all life, because that would almost be like a perfect Borg.
Yeah, maybe.
So anyway, for you, for explaining that to me, and for James, I have to say, because I didn't put any of that together, so that makes a lot of sense now that you say that.
Yeah, because I was thinking, why did she finish the sentence? But when I read what James said, I immediately thought, oh, of course.
James had one more, actually two more, one and then one small one. Hugh's reunion with Picard. He definitely helped him refocus and stay grounded. Without Hugh, I don't think JL's psyche would have been able to tolerate being there with the memories it brought to the surface. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And his last one is Romulan Hellraiser puzzle boxes.
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have Jim from Florida.
Well, technically, Jim is James, but
Well, maybe his name is Jim. We don't know. Don't make assumptions.
Okay.
He prefers Jim in any case because that's what it says here. So, Jim from Florida says the Picard locutus face overlay. He also says Stewart's acting with the impact of being back on a cube. The XB's recognition of him as Locutus, another nice reference to Borg. The Picard and Hugh reunion. Narek using his relationship with Soji to convince her he's there to help her figure out what is happening to her. Loved the personality manipulation. The lucid dream ceremony. Forget what it's actually called. What's it called? Somebody set it up here already. Jean-Luc.
Well, that's the name of the room.
The room? Oh, yeah, I don't know what the ceremony is. Maybe that's the name of the room and the ceremony. I don't know. Anyway, the XB recovery scene. There's more, but my list would be too long. LOL. There are some things I didn't like, but I absolutely loved way more than I disliked.
I have the exact same kind of feeling about this one.
Yeah, me too.
Definitely do. Okay, yes. Okay, so it is called Jean-Luc. So Jean-Luc might have been the name of the room, and it's also the name of the ceremony. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Stephen from the UK says, Rafi's call to an old friend. The Hugh Picard reunion? They hugged. The walls of the cube regenerating. Soji's awakening. Picard is with Soji. Yeah, finally, Picard is with Soji.
Mm-hmm.
Steve from OKC says, I'm intrigued by Soji now.
LT from NC says, Hugh and Picard on the cube. Man alive, that was such an intense set of scenes once Picard got back on the cube. I loved the additional details we got about the reclamation project, and I loved seeing how Picard and Hugh interacted, given that both of them now have more shared history of being XBs. I also want to know what the Romulans will do to Hugh once they figure out he was helping Picard extract Soji. I don't think it's gonna be good.
I don't either. Our last bit of listener yeses is from Rick from Cleveland. He says, a huge yes for Patrick Stewart. With passion around the Borg we haven't seen since First Contact, I appreciated both his portrayal and the director's use of the Borg and Locutus to drive home his PTSD. Yeah, I love that too. I loved all of that. Like, we saw things from Best of Both Worlds and especially First Contact. There was a lot of that, and I love that they used it. Yes, on Soji getting off the Borg cube, we've hopefully seen the last of her intimate moments with Narek and his distracting teeth. And I want to apologize to all of you for making those teeth never to be unseen once you see.
Oh gosh. Those teeth.
All right. Our yeses. What do you have?
All
right. I'll give one.
Okay.
Now, I didn't include Elnor in this point, but I guess you could say that Elnor was sensitive, but Rios seems to be the only one on that ship that seems to be sensitive to others. And I'll talk more about that in my nose, because there's one person in particular that's not terribly sensitive right now.
Yeah. I am not sure that I have any yeses that weren't already stated by listeners. I pretty much agree with all that stuff that they had.
I'm going to give credit to Brandy Jacala from, she's one of the podcasters on The Edge, but I heard her today on the Make It So podcast. She was a guest on there, and she brought up something I thought was interesting. She said, did Narissa abuse Narek when they were kids? Because I could kind of see an abusive vibe there between them, specifically her towards him. So I think that was kind of interesting. So I put that in my yeses.
Yeah.
I love Elnor's honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. It's refreshing, especially with all these Romulans being so deceptive. Having one that's completely open is a nice change of pace.
I agree with that.
And I want to give a yes to Hugh for living on a Borg cube, being so close to what, the artifact of what stole his identity, his individuality. I think that because Picard asks him, how can you stand living on this thing? And I think that was really kind of brought it home for me because, it's kind of like, I don't know, being in the eye of the storm in many ways.
It would be like for a Holocaust survivor to go back and live in Auschwitz or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to commend him for all the good that he's doing, and hopefully the Romulans won't make it so they can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
All right.
He's like, that's where the work is, so that's where I gotta go.
Yep. And I think that he's doing a great job there. I have more to say on that later. So now for our nose.
No!
Brian from Hawaii says, printed photos seem more common in the future than they are now. What was that thing that Soji kept saying, probable age 37 months? Does each Borg cube have its own queen? Several things there, but...
Yeah, no, I think that she was using, that thing she was using to scan her stuff was some kind of carbon dating techno widget thingamajig.
I was thinking of it like a tricorder, but, like a more futuristic tricorder.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Tricorder something. And I think that each Borg cube does not have its own queen. There's one Borg queen. And she talked about this a couple of times. I think she talked about it in First Contact, and she talked about it in Voyager. She always accused humans of having such linear thinking.
Yes.
So I think that chamber is in case she shows up, which I don't know how she shows up. That was never really explained, but she's apparently omnipresent when it comes to the Borg or something. Like, she's got her consciousness all over the place, and she can just download herself into whatever, wherever, whenever kind of a thing. And that's her space when she's there. She's like, I'm here and this is what I need. And she is the Borg. So that's why, I don't know. She's just, yeah. There can be only one queen, man. There's a queen bee and she's it.
Yeah. And I think my take on it was that she had the ability to travel through space and time with that whole non-linear, either that or she's in a Tarantino movie.
That's funny. Or she's living Memento.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or what's that? Benjamin Button, that other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living your life backwards.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know exactly. I mean, like I said, she never really explained it further. She just complained about our linear thinking, and I was like, I don't know how else to think. But I kind of feel like it's probably a combination of the whole moving through space and time thing. But honestly, I kind of feel like it's more like she has herself, like, you remember in First Contact when she descended from whatever thing, and we thought that Picard killed her, but I don't think that was the case because she showed up again in Voyager. So I think that she has the ability to just download herself, like she has a clone of herself or something, and she can download her consciousness into whichever clone she feels like hanging out in.
Yeah, she's Wayoon.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking it was, is that she has many different copies of herself, or, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Next, we have James, the Augmented Sailor, who says, the forced romance between Jurati and Rios. I know Jurati has become a really complex character from the last episode's closing moments, but the whole rebound sex thing just didn't work for me, and it wasn't believable. Even if there's some kind of angle to it for Jurati to get into Rios' head, it just felt awkward and forced. I did not think that it was awkward and forced because they had been flirting before, so it wasn't like it just popped up out of the blue. I mean, she did that whole, like, punchy punch his arm thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, sort of, but I have more to say on that later in my notes. When I say sort of, I'll explain it in more detail. There's certain parts of that I didn't like. And that was one of those things that I mentioned before.
I didn't have a problem with it because I kind of feel like that's sort of what would happen. I mean, she's grieving, and not to be too blunt or crude, he's a man. So,
I don't know. I guess I just didn't like seeing him. It was almost like he took advantage of her. And I guess that's why I reacted. I guess that's a sort of what I wanted to say.
I didn't think he was taking advantage of her. I mean, she stopped. He stepped back. He said, "Tell me how you're feeling."
Yeah.
And then she moved forward.
And that was the point I was making earlier about he seemed to be the only one that seemed to inquire with Jurati, inquire with Raffi, how they were doing, and nobody else did. But then again, he's got all these holograms of himself, which some people think that's like, he's all into himself, and I think it's the
Very
opposite.
Narcissistic.
Yeah, I don't think it's that at all.
I don't either.
I think that he hates himself, and so this is kind of like it's his own little self-help / torture that he's doing. So he's the kind of guy I think that kind of needs to be with others. So on that, I mean, she certainly was willing. So it's not like, he took advantage of her in that way. She was the one that actually making the advances. So
yeah, and I mean, he gave her a swig. He didn't liquor her up or roofie her or anything. So
right.
I don't know. I felt like she knew full well what she was doing.
Oh, she certainly did. Yeah.
And she went for it because she even said, yeah, it's going to help a little bit for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that's all she was looking for. I mean, honestly, to me, that would be the same thing as getting rip-roaring drunk, really. It's like 6 to 1, half a dozen of another. Anyway, so his final note is the way Raffi is used to gain access to the artifact. This is clearly exploiting her while she's clearly plunging into oblivion. Why is it Rio seemed to be the only one that's caring about her mental and emotional state? At that, he isn't doing much about it besides putting her to bed. This is probably the biggest departure from Picard's former self and into sheer hubris we've seen so far.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into with my nose, so I'll just say it. Picard still has his head up his own butt.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I wrote down applause is definitely the wrong reaction here, and you should have known that.
Yeah, I think that we've seen twice in this episode him not seeing the pain in others. Like, he didn't really seem to have any grasp of Jurati's pain, and he definitely didn't seem to, he seemed to be oblivious to Raffi's pain. And I agree with you, James, about there being such a departure. And again, maybe this is like part 3 of the things that I've seen as a departure to his character. I mean, it could have something to do with him just, completely like blocking himself off,
He's very single-minded right now.
Yeah. And the Picard that we knew, and yes, we've gone into this before, but this is a good time to bring it up. The Picard that we knew was very sensitive to others. He was very insightful and could pick up on these things. And that was a good reason why he was such a good leader. And this seems to be dormant in him. And I'm hoping that maybe getting that exposure to what he saw on the Borg ship and all the work that Hugh was doing, maybe that'll help open him up. I know he's eventually going to see Deanna Troi, may even be this episode coming up. And I hope that also, maybe he can talk to her a little bit and she'll kind of give him a nice slap on the head. Snap out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's figuratively, okay? Not literally. But kind of get him to snap out of it, because this is a departure. I don't like to see it. I understand why it's this departure, kind of, because he's had this trauma, this great defeat, and making it worse by kind of turning his back on all of it. I don't know what else to say about that except to say that I hope that we get to see that sensitive Picard, thoughtful Picard that we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Empathetic, really.
Yeah. It's just too self-centered. I don't like seeing this in him. So
I don't either. Especially because she burned a bridge basically to get what he wanted done.
Yeah. And his reaction was like, "Oh, thank you." And like
his reaction was great performance, not I appreciate your sacrifice.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I'm right there with you. I didn't like it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get some kind of explanation for this. I don't know.
Maybe.
Jim from Florida, speaking of Raffi, he says, "Raffi, I'm not a fan. Her addiction adds nothing to the story. It actually kind of takes me out of it for a minute. They want me to care about her, but I don't." I don't know. I got to disagree with you, Jim. She feels real to me in a lot of ways that, some of the other characters don't. I think she's like the most realistic character on the show right now. She's flawed, but that also makes her like a real character to me. She's smart, but she's obsessive, and she has her vices, and she's obviously screwed up her home life and things like that. This is a character that seems well drawn to me, well acted and all that stuff. And I'm sorry she doesn't work for you, but she does work for me. She's different than any character we've seen before, except for maybe Ensign Rowe. She's the only character I could think of that's like her.
Mm-hmm.
Rios hooking up with Girardi. I don't see him going for a vulnerable, scared, clearly broken female character. More like a 7 of 9 character, broken but badass. Sorry, didn't work for me. I don't know. There was definitely some flirting in past episodes, so I didn't really have a problem with it.
I refer to my previous statement.
Mm-hmm.
He's a man.
Anyway.
All right. Stephen from the UK says, "I feel Elnor is being underused. It's no 7 of 9 in this episode." Then Steve from OKC says, "Narek for not realizing that Soji could break out of that room."
And I cover this in my not good enoughs. And Ruthie, by the way, this was a no. That's now a not good enough. So
okay,
it's something you mentioned before. Rick from Cleveland, he says, "A no, however, for Picard in one moment. The applause when Raffi damaged her relationship with her friend to get his diplomatic credentials. Raffi was visibly hurt by the outcome of that conversation, and Picard's reaction was insensitive. I've only disliked Picard one other time, ironically in Borg, with his callous treatment of Hugh in that episode. Yet they're hugging now." But yeah, insensitive is a great word for that. I think that explains it very much.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that they reconciled in that one.
Descent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I would go so far as to say reconciled, but they had another chance. Let's just call it that.
And I think he owes Picard for his life, like basically allowing him to go back and
not using him as a
I mean that basically
trapdoor to kill the Borg.
Right. Plant a virus in him. Gee, what's with that shape?
Yep.
Hey Borg, you want to take a look at that shape? Oh, that's a weird shape. Oh, let's get a committee going.
Yep.
Anyway.
That's right.
Board committees.
Oh my gosh.
All right. What do you have for no's?
I still don't really like the Romulannisters.
Oh, well, you'll be. I have some information on that.
You have something to say?
I had this later in my notes, but I'll say it now. I listened to the Star Trek Picard podcast from Deadline, and they had Akiva Goldsman and Jonathan Frakes on this week. And Akiva Goldsman mentioned that originally the characters of Narissa and Narek were written as brother-sister lovers.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know when they changed that, but I guess that Lannister vibe kind of still stuck there.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't really find either of them very believable. And I'm not quite sure what it is. Like, I can't put my finger on it, but they just don't work for me. And it disappoints me because I really do like Peyton List.
Yeah, see, I don't even know her. This is my first time ever seeing her in anything. So, and one thing strange about her is, did you know that there's another actress by the name of Peyton List? This is like a rare occasion. The Screen Actors Guild has two actresses that are alive at the same time, both with the name of Peyton List.
I did not know that.
It's
I don't
weird.
really know why that's important.
Well, it is as far as the Screen Actors Guild. They frown on that, but for some reason it happened this time.
Interesting. I agree with, I can't remember who said it, that there were a lot of pictures. I'm like, yeah, that does seem kind of weird.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed about this particular show. They've had things like that, like pictures and a lot of 20th century and 21st century tech. Like, it wasn't just the photos, like she had like a scrapbook that she was writing in as a kid. And for that matter, like, why would she have that? That's not something, a typical adult would still be keeping around. It's kind of strange. So to me, that's not very believable.
Yeah.
The photos are one thing, but what I would expect with the photos is something we've seen in Next Gen, where it's kind of a photo, but it's a moving photo, like kind of like you look at it and suddenly it plays a little video or something, or a holographic type of picture, but nothing like
this.
Like
the thing like Data had of Tasha Yar.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Because when you say moving pictures, you make me think of Harry Potter.
Okay.
Because all the pictures move in Harry Potter. Like, none of them are still photos. They're basically like GIFs. And yes, that's how you pronounce it. GIF.
I'm a GIF person as well, so.
I mean, it stands for graphic. As I stated somewhere else on Facebook, just because the inventor or / creator of the word does not understand the rules of the English language and how acronyms work doesn't mean the rest of us have to be stupid too. Anyway, I think my only other note was, how come Hugh wasn't right there when he beamed in? And why did Picard wander off? It was like, oh man, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, if it were me and I had that kind of PTSD going on, I would stay stock still. I'd be like, I am not moving from this spot until someone comes to get me.
That is a good point. He should have just stayed put.
Yeah. I mean, I could kind of understand why Hugh wasn't right there, because he wasn't necessarily expecting him and blah, blah, blah. Then you would think that they would have him beam in a little closer to Hugh's position or something, or I don't know. But in any case, why didn't he stay still? Be stationary.
Yes. If you don't want to fall in the artifact, stay still. Don't walk across some narrow sidewalk that is 40 stories down.
Yeah, like, he's been on a cube before. He understands how they work. So I don't know. I just felt like that was semi-foolish, and I don't know if I would put it in my nose or not good enough, but there it is.
Yeah. Well, my biggest no, and this is the thing that ties this to the previous episode, there was no evidence or story to explain how Jurati covered her tracks.
Well, I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, they wouldn't necessarily, I mean, she said that his heart couldn't take it. They have no reason to disbelieve her at this point in time. So they wouldn't just, I mean, if it were you and me and you said his heart couldn't take it, I'd be like, okay. I wouldn't say, well, let's interview the emergency medical hologram just in case. I'd take your word for it.
I would think that the emergency hologram would have reported something to Rios,
Maybe, but she deactivated him, and it seems like he only activates when he senses some kind of medical emergency. So maybe it's not in his programming to just show up and basically tattle on someone. I mean, I know it's not, but that's kind of what it would be. It's like, I mean,
I don't know.
That's not necessarily in his programming. And as someone else previously stated, she's quite capable of reprogramming AIs.
Yeah, I believe that was Ken from Chicago said that. And yes, but I would have liked to have seen that. So if she could reprogram the AI to forget that, then I would have liked to have seen it, because that's kind of big thing that I was expecting to see. I wanted to see this. I brought it up last week. Didn't see it. You get a ding. Small ding for it.
Yeah, I get it.
A much smaller ding was, what did he do with Maddox's body? Did they just eject him into space?
No, they probably put him in cold storage or something. I mean, I don't know. If they have a sick bay, they have to have some way to deal with the dead.
La Serena morgue?
Yeah, stasis or something. I don't know.
All right. Well, that's it for our nose. So let's move on to not good enoughs.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
Brian from Hawaii. The Agnes Rios hookup near the beginning of the episode seemed an unnecessary distraction. For the characters or for us?
I don't know. Good question. All right. James, the augmented sailor, says Elnor knew exactly where to go to find Picard on the artifact. It's a totally foreign landscape for him, and he's all of a sudden right there at just the right time. For that matter, how did he get there? If he beamed in, wouldn't someone have picked up the transporter use on the computer? And not just on La Serena's end, but on the artifact end as well? I'd think they'd have immediately gotten a message from the Romulans being like, WTF, we said only Picard, and now you're sending someone else? Clearly, they're trying to shoehorn Elnor in where they can to make his character useful. I cannot disagree with you there, but I think that can be attributed to his badassness. Or his badassery.
Okay. Trying to shoehorn. I didn't feel like he was shoehorned. The part that I do feel about is knowing where to go, but, maybe they were required to beam Picard into precise coordinates. So Elnor may have known where Picard exactly was, and he was just going to do it and say the hell with everybody else. So since he programmed, and for that matter, how did he know how to do that? But that's besides the point. So the fact that he had those coordinates, he beamed in. So I don't really have a problem with it, assuming that but we don't know that he knows how to do that. But that's the only part that I would kind of go, but he just went where he had to go.
The only thing I can think is that they had a lock on Picard.
Yeah.
And because they had a lock on Picard, they knew his position, so Elnor knew exactly where to beam into.
Right. And he was badass.
Yeah.
I actually loved him going in there and doing that. So
yeah,
I thought that was great. And I loved, he had the last line of the episode.
Please, my friends, choose to live.
I love that.
Like, yes!
Yeah.
That was so great.
Yeah.
That should have been in my yeses. I'm making that in my yeses.
Retroactive yes.
I'm retroactively yesing that. Thank you very much. All right.
And I second it retroactively.
Very good. All right, moving on. James also says the superimposing of Locutus's face over Picard in the cold open. I totally understand where they were going with it, and visually it was nice. However, it was problematic. We know that the implant around Locutus's eye was on his left side, and as an amputee, I know a little something about phantom sensation. The issue here is that when we see him grasp for his face, he grasps the right side. Seeing the image would have stirred up the nerves on the left side of his face, where the implant was, not the right. I give this a not good enough and not a no because I get it. The shot was cool, showing the duality of Picard and Locutus. It was just flawed. That's another good point.
And I have to disagree, so I'm going to say, because we're seeing that image through, so it's essentially not, well...
I was going to say, nope, I'm going to have to counteract your disagreement because I saw him touch his right side of his face.
Right. Okay, but, I'd have to look and see a picture of... Okay, let's see.
Well, I paid special attention to it.
Oh, I know
because of that. And he's right. He grasped the right side of his face instead of his left.
But we're actually seeing the picture from the opposite side. So
it doesn't matter what side the picture is on. The point is, the implant was on his left side and he grasped the right side of his face. It doesn't matter how the image was overlaid. They made it so because of the way that the image was overlaid, they made him grasp the right side of his face because of the image overlay. It looked like it was the right side of his face that the implant was on. However, when you look at the picture's on the implant is on the left side of his face. So he should have grabbed the left side of his face, not the right side of his face.
When you say left side, are you saying our left and his right, or are you saying his right?
He grasped the right side of his face.
So his right.
Yes.
His device was on the right side of his face. I'm looking at it right now. It is the right side of his face. So that's what I'm saying. It's definitely, I didn't have a problem with this. I think that actually it was as it's supposed to be. Let me just...
Okay. Sorry, James. You're wrong.
See?
See what?
The picture I just...
Oh.
I believe that that's what we saw. So, and for him to hold, like he held that side. So I think it was actually correct, or maybe there was an image flipped or something. I don't know, but I think it looked the way it was supposed to. But anyway, I can't say equivocally without actually watching it again.
Well, if that is actually on the right side of his face, then he did grasp the right side.
Yeah.
The correct side of his face when he grasped the right side of his face.
Right.
But yeah. Okay. So never mind. Sorry, James. I tried to fight for you. And we'll have a picture of this somewhere so that we can all see that the implant was actually on the right side of his face.
Jim from Florida says, Romulan Legolas beaming in just in the nick of time, right in the Queen's chamber. If it was so easy to beam there, why not just beam Picard out? Oh, I know, for suspense and dramatic effect.
Ha. I think it was too late for that because Elnor beamed in before the trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Stephen from the UK says, and he makes a very good point here, I think. Soji always used the same scanning device. What if it was malfunctioning and reading everything as 37 months? Would have liked it better if she had tried more than one scanner to confirm the readings are true.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I agree. As a scientist, you should you should be open to the possibility that your equipment is malfunctioning.
Yeah.
And then Steve from OKC says, it was a little too easy for Rafi to get Picard his credentials.
I would agree with that. Definitely agree.
Yeah. I feel like she kind of blackmailed what's-her-face from Starfleet.
Did you have any not good enoughs?
I did. I feel like if Soji's self-preservation programming is kicking in, why didn't she automatically trust Picard like Daj did? Because she hesitates a lot.
I wondered that myself.
Whereas Daj was like, I trust you. I don't know why. But Soji's like, and if they're true twins, like clones of each other or whatever.
Yeah, you'd think that she would have had Picard programming.
Yeah, the same failsafe that Daj had. But I don't know. So that was kind of was not good enough for me.
Well, I originally had this one as a no, but after rewatching it today, I scaled it back to a not good enough. And that is that Narek was a James Bond villain in this episode.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is him thinking. He's like, well, I could use the acid spitting trick, but, do it in such a way not to kill myself in the process, because, that would kill her. But I'd rather use this Rubik's Cube and spill red matter. Leak a red mist slowly to give Soji enough time to activate and escape the room by punching a hole in the floor. I had a Dr. Evil son, Scotty Evil moment watching that, like, just shoot her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason why I changed it from a no to a not good enough is one thing I missed on my first watch that I changed on the second and the third watch is that I didn't see the first time, or it didn't sink in, that Narek was crying as he said goodbye. Like there were tears coming from him.
Yeah.
And when he, stepped out, he wouldn't look and he was crying. You could interpret this as a Bond villain, but I think maybe he did that in the hopes that she would escape. So
yeah, maybe
it's a true thing that he actually fell in love with her.
Maybe.
I mean, the tip to that is that, he supposedly gave his real name, which I had down in my
But
notes
did
here.
he?
Well, that's the question. Is that the real name?
Well, because his real name apparently means nothing in French.
Ryan?
I mean, not apparently, it does. Rien.
What?
He said, my true name is Rien, which in French is nothing.
Oh.
He said, my true name is
Oh.
Rien.
Interesting.
Non, rien. Non, je ne regrette rien.
That deserves a...
Not for my singing.
Not for your singing. No. Definitely not.
Anyway, yeah. Rien means nothing en français.
Okay, so here's a big question I've got at this point. Why are the Romulans / Tal Shiar, the Zhat Vash specifically, so sure that there's a nest?
I don't know.
We've seen no evidence that there are any other androids other than Daj and Soji. Like, why would...
I don't know either. That's a good question.
Yeah, that part of it I don't get,
I think that's been niggling in the back of my mind, and I didn't really realize it until you just said that.
Yeah.
It's like, why are they so convinced that there's a nest? They're trying to uncover this nest. I'm like, we don't know there's a nest.
There's been nothing to confirm that there's a nest. So
Or even indicate that there's a nest.
Exactly.
I don't know. They're just weird.
And
I don't like them.
Speaking of not liking them, how is it that she sees 2 red moons and a bunch of lightning in a dream state, enough to give away the location of the nest? That seems like awfully thin evidence to me.
I don't know. I think, honestly, I was confused by that because the dream is her brain's way of processing her cognitive dissonance.
Right.
That's what Narek said. So if that's the case, why should that have anything to do with where this, we don't know if it exists, nest is?
Exactly.
That could be the planet where she was created, but they should already know that because they destroyed, what's-his-face's lab, Bruce Maddox's lab.
Exactly.
I mean, I would think that he created her in his lab. I don't know.
That doesn't make any sense unless somehow in that time frame, they went off and like recreated a bunch of them.
I don't know. I don't really. It seems like, honestly, I'm a little disappointed because it seems like a really thin impetus for this whole entire thing.
Unless somebody else destroyed the lab and it wasn't the Zhat Vash. I mean,
no, he pretty much said it was the Tal Shiar.
Yeah,
they destroyed my lab. That's the reason why I can't pay you back.
Yeah, he did.
So
doesn't make sense.
I don't know. I don't get it. It seems like a very thin, reason for the boogeyman to be after her, or for her to be the boogeyman or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. You're right. It doesn't make sense to me, and I don't understand why they're doing that. But I'm pretty sure that Ruffy's going to get there, because even when she's hungover, her brain still works pretty great.
Yeah.
Because she's like, why are they keeping her alive? I'm like, that's a good question that someone who doesn't know what we know should ask.
Yeah, but it is a question. It's like, indeed, why would they keep her alive? Because they killed off Daj. But
I think that was an accident.
Well, okay, but they still killed her off.
Yeah.
If all they wanted to do was kill the 2 androids, they would have killed them both off. And, they destroyed the lab, which I hadn't even thought of that point, Ruthie, but that's a great point. It's like, well, they already know where the nest is. So is there another nest? I don't know.
I don't know either.
But the one point I was going to bring up with that is that, and this comes out in the book, the Romulans, there's like this whole thing about the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. And it could even be within the Zhat Vash itself. Like the Zhat Vash may have already destroyed the nest, and these other people in the Zhat Vash don't know it, So they did some really crazy things in that book. And I'm not going to tell that story. That's a story that I really want to tell, by the way. So if there's anyone listening to this that's read the book and wants to talk about it, let me know, because I want to talk about it. I just didn't get to talk about it much on the Patreon because nobody there had listened to the book or read the book. So,
well, I'm going to read it soon enough. So if you're not.
Oh, Well, good.
I just haven't yet. I'm sorry. I told you I'm in the middle of another series.
Okay. Well, you'll want to read it. It's really good. I already started listening to it, the audiobook, for a second time. So.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I have 3 hours and 18 minutes left in that series.
Oh, good. Oh, so I didn't realize you were that close. Okay, so maybe we'll talk about it. All right, so that's it for our everything except for listener feedback. So let's open hailing frequencies. All right, so we've got some voicemails, and we've got a first ever voicemail from Brian from Hawaii.
Hello, Brian, Ruthie, and all listeners. This is Brian from Hawaii. First, I owe you an apology for perhaps coming off as overly critical of Patrick Stewart, by extension this show, in some of my feedback recently. The criticism levied against the podcast regarding my feedback on his acting made me realize that I don't spend enough effort expressing gratitude and appreciation for having new Trek that furthers stories in this universe. While there is a tendency to nitpick on the negative, I need to remember to also emphasize the positive at least as much. I'm sure you understand that all comments, whether good or bad, are made out of a love for Star Trek in this series. I found Fred's remarks about how elderly people lose expressiveness in their faces very interesting, so I tried something. I listened to the first 4 episodes of the series with the audio only. In doing so, I found that most of my no's regarding Stewart's acting fell away. While his voice does sound less clear than it used to be, he still delivers his lines with the same feelings of gusto and earnestness as always. It's his facial expressions, or really the lack thereof, and the new mannerisms he's adopted to compensate, like the ashamed sort of nod he always has now, which I find so wooden and unnatural, and off-putting, frankly. I was amazed how differently I perceived him when I listened versus looked at him. So I think Stewart's skill as an actor is in relatively good shape, but he just can't carry himself and emote the way I'm used to seeing him in his now much older body. Listening to rather than watching the episodes also made me realize that many of my other no's for the show so far are related to visual choices made by the showrunners. Comments about the holographic ship controls and the styles, some scenes looking like they belong to other franchises, or how some costume choices look out of place for Star Trek, are all irrelevant when the audio is the only window into the plot. I found that I sometimes better enjoy the show when I'm not distracted by visual elements which don't conform to my preconceived idea of what Star Trek should look like. Of course, the downside to this strategy is that I also deprive myself of the majestic cinematic beauty of the show. My next experiment will be watching on my phone's small screen instead of on my big 4K TV. That way, I can still see what's going on without the high-resolution visuals that could distract from my enjoyment of the plot. Also, Brian, you had pointed out in the previous podcast that my rating for episode 1 was a 9.9. Yes, I stand by that rating because it was a nearly perfect episode. As my feedback later for episode 4 stated, that initial episode included data and so many fun Easter eggs like the Enterprise D and 10 Forward that any slight acting imperfections didn't matter at all. It was really episode 3 in particular that did not work for me, and thus brought down my overall rating for the 3-episode prologue, which I'd consider as really one episode. To me, that was the low point of the series. Everything has been improving ever since then, to the point that I found this latest episode 6 to be almost as good as the first one. We'll see if this crescendo continues. Finally, I want to thank you for creating this community of listeners. I'm really enjoying the podcast for the opportunity to participate in the discussions and to add greater depth to my understanding and appreciation of Star Trek. Mahalo.
Aw,
Wasn't that a great voicemail?
that was great. Thanks, Brian. Mahalo.
Mahalo. And of course, Brian, you deserve a showcase award for this one. And it's great after such a long time of you sending us feedback to get our first voicemail from you. It was really good after, like, we've been hearing from you on Discovery, I think almost since the beginning, and Picard. So I really enjoyed the voicemail today.
Yeah. We love hearing your voices.
Yes.
That means we don't have to read.
Yeah. I think
Yep.
your take of listening to Picard rather than watching it brings up an interesting perspective, as did Fred's perspective last week, which I don't feel like I really did a good job reacting to that feedback last week. Listening back to it, we reacted more to Fred nitpicking about my mistake than we did some of the other things that he said. But, specifically, he was saying about his eyes not being as expressive. And one thing I noticed about this particular episode is there were certain looks, certain camera angles where his eyes were very expressive, and then other angles where they weren't. And I think a lot of that has to do with, he's not wearing any makeup on this show. He's doing that to, try to look the part, try to look the age, and where he might have some like eyelid tightening makeup or something like that. He doesn't have that here. So, for whatever reason.
I think that's called Botox.
Oh, well, no, not on the eyelids.
There's such a thing. Yeah, on eyelids. I don't think there's such a thing as eyelid tightening makeup.
I thought there was.
If there is, please send me a link, Brian, because I need it. I have droopy eyelids.
So do I, as you can see.
My eyelids overhang, and this has been the case since I was young, but I have very deep set eyes, and my eyelids, like you can't see any of my eyelids at all when my eyes are open. And the upper part of my eyelid, that between my, that sets on my brow bone there between my eye and my eyebrow, as I have aged, has begun to droop. And will droop more and more and more the older I get, I'm sure. So if you know of this eyelid tightening makeup, please tell me about it.
And we will continue with the Droopy Eyelid podcast, because I also have that. But before we do that, we have to say,
what is this bizarre segue that's happening right now? Can we maybe stay on point?
Well, the one thing I will say, Brian from Hawaii, is you've done a good job of bringing up nitpicking, Brian, even though nitpicking Brian has been kind of away because we don't like him. Nobody likes him. I don't even like him. So I will agree with you on the less clear voice. I hear that as well. Like it's more grovelly, and I can't figure out how much of that is Patrick Stewart, at 79.
It's just age.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's just age. That just happens.
I have heard the voice come back in certain parts, and then I've heard this kind of like grovelly,
scratchy
voice.
Kind of.
Yeah. So
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not as clear and booming as it used to be, but I think I just attribute that to age.
But then occasionally it comes back. So I have heard it at times. So
I think it's unfortunate that you have to only listen because TV is very much an audio-visual medium. So there must be something wrong if that makes that much of a difference, because you are missing all of the great visuals if you have to do that in order to enjoy it better. So hopefully it will continue to improve and you won't have to just listen.
I want to point something out from this episode that I think is a clear example of how Ruthie and I have been taking things versus how you and Fred have been taking things a bit. What we see here in this episode, and it was brought up earlier, the perfect word for it, Picard's insensitivity. To me, that's not an acting choice. That is a writing choice. They have clearly written him to be insensitive, which is a little off-putting, but it's not a performance issue. It's clearly just this is where Picard is today. Very insensitive, very, thinking of himself and his mission before everybody else, and damn the other people. Rafi's hurting. Well, I'm not going to bother asking her what's wrong, even though he should. But
yeah, well, I mean, he did go to her at the end of last week's episode, or was it the week before?
He did, yes.
When knocked on our door. Rafi, are you there?
Yeah. I think that this will come back. I think that this is all something he's discovering slowly. And unfortunately, we're still seeing examples of this. And I don't know. It also makes me think if Laris and Shaban thought so highly of him, what are they going to think of him when he gets back and he's back to the Picard that we know? They're going to absolutely adore him. They'll never leave his side.
Yeah.
It'll be Picard and 3 Romulans living in Chateau Picard because, of course, Elnor will be there too. So,
right. Because we all know he's going to escape from the Borg cube.
Of course.
Somehow. Or at least the clutches of the Romulans.
Yes.
Please, friends, choose to live.
And let's hope that Hugh also gets out of there because I imagine his time is over with that, but he can do other stuff. All right, I think that's it for your great voicemail. Don't be a stranger. Thanks for all of your feedback over the many episodes, both this and Discovery. You've been a great supporter of us, and we'll hopefully catch you on the Patreon one of these times. You haven't been on there during one of our call-ins, but hopefully you'll make it one of these times. All right, so anyway, let's move on. We've got another voicemail from Jeff from North Carolina.
Hello, Star Trek fans. This is Jeff X-Force 11 leaving my feedback for the latest episode of Picard. I really enjoyed this episode because of the character insights that we got into several different characters, but I mainly want to dwell on Jean-Luc. Going back to a Borg cube where you once were enslaved and made a part, you could just tell by Patrick's acting how much it just hurt Jean-Luc and how he was dealing with the stresses and basically PTSD, and him being able to go forward because of his drive to save Soji was great. Seeing his interactions with Hugh were great too, and Hugh being able to show him what they were doing and the good work of reclaiming the former Borg, where it was just amazing to see. I thought this was a very character-driven episode and an episode that really did a lot for me for this series. I've enjoyed a lot of this series, but I think this episode really gave us a lot of action, but a lot of insight into some of the things that have been haunting our characters for a while. Those are my thoughts. X-Force 11 is out.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate your voicemails. As usual, I think that's 6 for 6, is it not? I think so. Anyway, yes, I loved seeing the PTSD in detail. I think that was a long time coming. I would have liked to have seen more of that in the past. We didn't really get that in
TNG.
Yeah, we got a little bit of it, but not to this extent. They really showed it in detail, and I think this is something that's haunted Picard for 30 years. So it makes every totally understand why at this point it would affect him like that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's maybe somewhat easier to sort of forget about it when it's not in your face.
Yeah.
But he's back on the cube, and it's like in your face.
And that's been a big thing of this show, where Picard, had like gone into a cocoon on the Vineyard, not dealing with a lot of stuff. And it seems like, especially I'd say the last, well, even, the everything after the premiere, we have seen him having to deal with the reactions from Starfleet, the reactions from Raffi, the reaction from Elnor and the people on Vashti, and like just all and 7 of 9 as well. All the reactions of the things that he didn't do. And I think that he's, waking up. People love to say he's becoming woke or something, but that's not that at all. He just had been asleep. And we're still seeing evidence that he's still not quite there yet, and that's where the insensitivity, I think, comes in. But he's getting there, and he came a long way, I think, this week. I'm going to bring up something that's in my notes because it fits here, and that is I'm hoping that he's going to learn from his experience going to the Borg artifact from the work that Hugh is doing with the X-Borgs. Because this was something he mentioned on Vashti, that he made the perfect become the enemy of the good. And, this kind of referred to, he says that, it's not perfect, but it's good what he's doing. And like, there's so much good in this, something even Hugh kind of says, hey, this is something you could be doing, because he would be the perfect advocate for these ex-Borg to, become independent, because it seems like they're not, it's almost like they're prisoners on this artifact. They're not really allowed to live their own life. They're just here. And Hugh can, because he's a citizen of the Federation, but the rest of these Borgs or ex-Borg can't ever leave the cube. They're kind of stuck here. And yes, they're becoming more quote unquote human, but they don't have free will to do whatever they want. So this is where Picard, there's so much good that he could do for several different things that we're seeing. And maybe this is where the story's going to go in the end. He could become an advocate for the Romulan refugees and, improve their situations, because we know that they're not doing so great on Vashti and, probably the other planets that are, because some of them are, Vashti is a Federation world, by the way. We learned that in the book. I don't think that's a big spoiler, but clearly there's been injustice to the synths by, shutting them all down. And there's obviously injustice to these ex-Borgs. And he could just not even have any governmental power or Federation power, but just be a lobbyist for the rights of these things, and incite the Federation to gain popular opinion, to get these things together, and to get, because I think these Romulan refugees, I mean, it's 14 years out, but if you make their world better, they're going to be your friend, and I think that it's not too late. It's really not too late. 14 years aside, people have forgotten about them, and the world is chaotic, or the galaxy's, chaotic. 709 mentions that last episode. There's just so much he could do, and I hope that he's coming awake to that.
I also enjoyed the Picard showing his emotional scars from when he was Locutus. I thought that was good. That's what I have to say.
I agree. All right. Next is another voicemail from Edwin from Arizona.
Hello, Brian and Ruthie. This is Edwin again from Arizona. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I've been watching The Next Generation Season 7, and been watching all the 4 Next Generation movies, and as I watched Picard, it's paying off. And, during the season, they had Data's dad, Data's mom, which looks exactly like a human until they find out that she's an android made by Data's dad. Data having the dream program in one episode. Yeah, a lot of Data episodes and all the 4 Data storylines in the movies really tying into Picard, and I really like it. And I just wanted to make that comment, and I'm really enjoying you guys' Facebook. Really good interaction, and thank you guys for doing this and having the podcast. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Well, thank you so much, Edwin, for those kind words. And I know Ruthie had just finished her own rewatch of Next Gen. I kind of stopped mine, haven't gone back to it yet, but I do plan on finishing the rest. I think I'm like about a little more than halfway through season 6. That's so. And Ruthie was able to finish hers completely.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Although I did not finish all the way before the season started, but shortly thereafter.
Yeah. Yep. So.
I agree. I like the Data stuff.
I do too. And I wonder what happened to Juliana Tainer, I think was her name.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm like, surely they didn't kill all the synths, because she's probably still kicking around. He said he programmed her to live a long life and then like basically pass away in her sleep.
Mm.
So I assume that's longer than 20 years.
One would assume.
Or I should say 20 more years. So she's obviously out there somewhere. And who else knows about that? Because Data did talk to a couple of people about whether or not he should tell her.
Well, I think Picard knows.
That's what I was thinking. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's just a thread that's going to be dropped. There's no way they can pick it up. I don't know.
At this point, if they haven't mentioned it, they're probably not gonna.
Yeah.
Unless like she shows up and, Soji, I'm your grandma.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, honestly, they could make, if they did have her, then they could probably recreate. I don't know if they could use that to fix Data, her positronic neurons or whatever.
Well, I don't think her positronic net was made as sophisticated as his. Like, she's just basically made to have the capabilities of a regular human, not all of his capabilities. I remember that. But still, I would think that the building blocks would be there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's Lore.
Lore. She's still a functioning positronic brain.
Which I know Lore was deactivated, but I don't think he was destroyed. He's probably still on Valerian 3, where the D is. I'm assuming they recovered the Enterprise D saucer section, but you never know. Let's see. Next, a final voicemail from Steve from Oklahoma City.
Hey, Brian and Ruthie, it's Steve. I just wanted to send in a couple quick notes to expand upon my Facebook feedback a little bit. I really did enjoy this episode, and I like that we're finally getting the story with Soji. I expressed this in my Facebook feedback, so I don't want to expand a little bit on it. Is that I'm glad we've gotten to this point where I actually care about her story now, and so it's going to be interesting going forward how that looks and what they're going to do with her. Absolutely love that ending with Elnor and his "please, gentlemen, choose to live," or exactly how he said it. I don't remember. I really, really like that. And I hope we get to see that fight, or some of that fight, at least in the next episode, maybe. I hope he's not done. There was a moment there that it showed in the closed captioning, but I didn't hear it from the episode when Picard and he are parting. And, Picard says, I don't want to leave you behind again. And he says, "Oh, how much my heart soars to hear that," or whatever, however he said it. Then Picard turns away to leave, and the closed captioning showed Picard saying, "I'll find you again." But I didn't hear that in the dialogue. So I'm not sure if it didn't make it into the episode or how that got mixed up there. I don't know if anybody else noticed it who watched it with closed captioning. So this was a quick one, but I really did. I enjoyed the episode. So talk to you later.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for your voicemail. Good to hear from you again, and good things. And I want to say something. Well, actually, so does Ruthie, so I'll let her say it first.
Oh, yeah, Elnor said, "It fills my heart with joy to hear you say that."
Yeah, I love that. But I noticed that too on the captioning, and I didn't hear that, but
I didn't hear it.
But I definitely read it in the captions, so had a similar kind of thing. And I also want to see that fight. Hopefully they'll break the pattern of the cold opens either being a flashback or a dream sequence. All 6 have been that way. And we'll have a fight sequence. And if not that, right after the theme. So, all right. So that's it for our voicemail. So now it's just written feedback. I will go ahead and I'll start. James, the Augmented Sailor. I really enjoyed this episode. Lots of reveals and a couple more questions raised. I really enjoyed seeing the humanity and vulnerability being portrayed in the XBs. I think it garners sympathy from the audience quite well. I also like the explanation that the reclamation is independent from the Federation of Romulan governments, though it does seem to have a quite heavy Romulan presence. I'd give the latter and not good enough, but the way that Hugh explains the sentiment towards the reclaim, I can see the Federation just not really caring, at least openly, about the project to have a large contingent there. The Federation has an image to uphold, and I think there'd be a public outcry if it had too much of a presence there. And James, you had some things also there. You said looking forward to everyone's thoughts on the episode, but you did say a little bit more, but it's spoilery, and some people don't watch the previews, so I am going to hold that until the end.
Okay. So the reclamation itself, I think, is independent from the Federation and the Romulan governments. But Hugh does say that unlike all the rest of the XBs, he's a Federation citizen.
Right.
So I'm not sure how independent it is. It seems like maybe neither the Romulans nor the Federations really care if the XBs get reclaimed or whatever. But it just so happens that it's on a cube that's controlled by Romulans. So
I'm wondering if both the Federation and the Romulans have like denied citizenship to ex-Borgs, like except for
those who already are.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
So like 7 of 9 and Hugh were probably granted, and Icheb were probably granted that.
Yeah, he was a Starfleet officer.
Right. But these ex-Borgs, for whatever reason, haven't been. And that's probably because they were granted that before sentiment changed. And they're kind of thought probably in tandem with the synths, and everyone, hates the synths. They're probably the one kind of group that are less than even the Borg, the ex-Borg. So, because everybody hates the Borg, and they are just the forgotten, I think, the ex-Borgs.
Yeah. But he does say that their queen is now a Romulan.
Yeah, and I don't think that was actually what he meant. Was not that the queen, there's a Romulan Borg queen. What he meant is, yeah.
The answer to a Romulan.
Yeah. What that meant was that...
That was a tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah. That they're basically under Romulan control, but that they're not allowed to be free. So,
well, everybody else but him.
Everybody but him.
Yeah, he's a Federation citizen, which I think might be the only thing that saves him next week.
Oh, that's true.
Because he still is a Federation citizen, so...
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. All right, Aaron from Akron says, that was a much better episode. I agree.
That's all that he said. Just short, but sweet.
Yep, that's it. All right, I'm going to say Wes from Minneapolis also says, finally got to see it. The Picard-Hugh reunion was great. I also like the callback to Voyager's prime factors with the Sicarian spatial trajector. Jurati has got to be a spy, and it will all blow up in Picard's face.
Yeah, I'm really wondering what the deal is there. Maybe she is Commodore O.
Ha, ha, ha.
Who knows?
I don't see Commodore O knocking boots with Rios.
Oh, that's true.
Just can't say it.
Then I have to give myself a... or...
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
Or should I also say...
It's a trap!
Just because I haven't used that in a while.
Stability loss was due to an impact by a subspace interface pocket.
I think I'm the only one that likes that one.
I don't dislike it. I just don't think it's as funny as you do.
It's a non sequitur. That's what I'm going for. It's like,
yep.
What?
Yep, pretty much. That's what it is.
Jim from Florida says, I keep hearing people on other pages and podcasts say how showing the Borg as people and victims is a new idea. Am I the only one who remembers Voyager Season 6, Episode 26, Unimatrix Zero, where the individual personalities live in a virtual world when they are in regeneration?
Nope, I remember Unimatrix Zero quite well.
The key word there is other, not us.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that other also includes the Ready Room. Because
yes,
they talked about that as though it's a new thing as well. And I was like, man, you were on Voyager, Jerry. What's wrong with you?
I think that they didn't explore it in the same way. It was kind of, not as... But then again,
it's not a new concept.
It clearly was.
They didn't explore it as much.
Exactly.
but it's not a new idea.
Yeah, they definitely did look at the Borg as victims because, they were victims.
Yeah. Well, even Picard started to see that when he got to know Hugh.
Right.
And saw him as an individual rather than a piece of the collective.
And he had a hard time coming up with that one, too. Or the Icheb character being used as a weapon. And he refers to Season 6, Episode 19, Child's Play. Or when we meet the other former Borg that are mentally linked because Seven reassimilated them because she was scared of her individuality. Season 6, Episode 2, Survival Instinct. Those are just a few. There are many episodes that show that the Borg are really victims. It's not a new idea. This series shows it with a much darker connotation that may make it hit home a little more than previous renderings, but it is by no means a new idea. Yeah.
You are correct, sir.
I think everything you said there is true, especially with the darker connotations. Like it's examined, but it's much more of a surface examination. So that's how I remember it anyway. But like, especially all the Borg kids, that are rescued, including Icheb, they were definitely looked at as victims there. So, and I remember the one where she linked the Borg together. That's kind of strange, that one. I remember. I still got to do my Voyager rewatch.
Me too.
Yeah. That's next on the agenda for me. All right, next.
Next is Stephen from the UK, who says, loved it. Best episode so far. Got my pulse up at the end. First time for the series so far. Based on this episode, I'm hoping the tide has turned for the pace of the story and the rest of the season keeps the momentum. It's kind of similar to Discovery Season 1 in that they broke it down at the start and then built it up towards the end, Mirror Universe. I didn't mind the Narek-Soji interactions this episode as I felt it revealed his true intent and her true self to herself. I will be interested to hear Fred's thoughts on Patrick's acting this week.
The only thing we got from Fred on that was Patrick's acting was much, much better. Actually amazing sometimes. That's why I gave this episode a 9 out of 10. Still in this episode one moment, it was not 100%, but just one and fully compensated by the rest. Greets Fred. I don't know what that other thing was, but she didn't tell us.
I have no idea.
All right. Alex from New Jersey is next. He says, I've not had a chance to give much feedback this season, but I have to say that before this episode, the show has been good, but this week and last week was great for me. It was so amazing that when JL entered the cube and all the feelings came rushing back, especially when they were rushing to leave, someone called out Locutus.
Yeah. And it was like, Locutus? That was fun.
I like the fact that all the Borg know each other.
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
Because they're a hive mind collective.
They all have a big Cheers bar.
Shared, yeah. Where everybody knows your name. Yeah. I noticed that too. I was like, oh, that was good. All right. Next we have LT from NC, who has just a few words to say. He says, the cold open with Soji was so much like a slasher movie with a dose of Blade Runner. Then we had to see Soji and Narek doing the cuddly thing. He keeps asking her questions and she gets angsty and she asks him questions and he bolts. The trend is that when Picard gets confronted or has a moment of confusion, he heads back to the vineyard. Okay, maybe James didn't like it, but the Locutus screen overlay with Picard's face and the cheek feel was a reminder of how much he is still on edge about the former Borgness. This seems to be a trend with this series, doing the screen overlay thing. Did you have something?
We already covered that, so I won't give him another fail buzzer.
You only fail once on this podcast.
Unless you're us, then yeah.
we fell over and over.
Myself.
Oh. All right. He goes on to say, Agnes and Rios. I would have been on board with this ship before she pulled the plug on Bruce last week. Now I wonder what will happen once Rios finds out what she did, and I'm having a hard time seeing our girl Aggie in the same light I did before last week.
I have the exact same reaction to this.
Yeah, I still like her, but she's definitely got some stuff.
Yeah, and if the last, 2 minutes of the last episode had happened differently and, he died as opposed to her killing him, I would be looking at this completely differently than I looked at it now. But I had exactly the same kind of reaction to this. It just didn't, there was part of it just didn't feel right. And it was just, I didn't care for it. And it was actually part of my deduction.
Oh, see, I didn't mind it, honestly, because to me, I feel like she's feeling guilty and unsure, and this is something positive and life-affirming. So that's why she's falling right into it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, never mind.
What?
I don't want to finish that sentence.
Okay. All right, he goes on to say, just going to say it. With all the layered and complex Romulans so far, Narissa is being just what we expected. The classic mustache-twirling evil villain, which, on a side note, is rather refreshing. I don't always need so much layering and complexity in my bad guys.
I hope Narissa doesn't have a mustache, though.
I haven't seen one so far.
I haven't either.
Oh, my goodness. I just want to know what Agnes is up to because I know she isn't just the happy sidekick I thought she was when she got on the crew. I smell a Lorca here. The conversation between Soji and Narek about the 70-second phone calls. You kind of had to figure that the Romulans would be watching your phone minutes.
All I got to say, Soji, is text messaging.
Yeah.
No
kidding. Rafi and the intel officer showed just how many connections okay, wait, let me just back up. Who exactly is she calling? Like, what phone number is she calling? If she's actually making a real phone call.
She's probably calling the
Yes.
What would it be? The Maddox Soon Industries hotline. I don't know.
See, that's what this whole thing confused me a little bit because I didn't actually expect her to actually be making an outgoing call.
I'm not surprised about the outgoing call because there's this glitch. It was something I mentioned, I think, even first episode. There's this glitch when she talks to her mom that, to me, if it was a part of her, there wouldn't be any, a glitch would suggest lag, and there shouldn't be any lag if it's a part of her, unless it's old times and she's like Data and she has to say accessing.
That makes sense.
I don't know.
But anyway, I just wondered where she was actually calling if the call was going out for 70 seconds.
I don't know.
I didn't think it was necessarily an internal program, but I thought it was a program that was not external to the cube.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's something that she, unaware or unbeknownst to herself, is carrying around with her. Like anytime she plugs into a new program, like a new, workstation or something, she's automatically got this AI program in there somehow that when because she's on her computer. So I kind of thought it was just a program on her computer kind of a thing. And that she wasn't actually calling out anywhere because I don't know, but what you say about the lag makes sense. Anyway, moving on. Rafi and the intel officer showed just how many connections she had before things went to hell, and also that she would burn through favors for JL.
I was going to say she needs to move to a fiber connection.
Yeah. You can also see the depth of the relationship with her and Rios, which I hope we get a little more detail on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. My final point is the meditation room. This was a good plot point in my estimation because it shows that the Romulans and the Vulcans do have a sort of shared ritual system, since we know the Vulcans meditate to focus their logic, and now we have the meditational maze thing the Romulans do. I think the analogy of meditating in a maze suits the way we have come to see the Romulans as bearers of secrets and deception. The blank-faced dad and the doll on the table was a pretty epic shot and drove home the point that all those memories are artificial, just like all of her childhood stuff being only 3 years old. I liked last week a lot, and I like this week even more. While I want to see what they do next, I have a lurking bit of doubt in my mind about a potential cliffhanger based on the number of episodes left.
Just because you mentioned cliffhanger. All right. I really wonder about that. Like, I'm still wondering if Romulans can do a mind meld. We've never seen it, but, they're so secretive. It's possible. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, it would make sense that there would be, given the common ancestry, and you would expect that there would be something to it. So we'll hopefully see that. But I just hope that this mystery about them is finally revealed and this doesn't drag into next season. I'm hoping that next season will be, some other adventure and not this one, because I don't want to be wondering for a whole season about those crazy Romulans. So there's a lot of threads that need to be sewn up in the next 4 episodes. All right. Rick from Cleveland is next. He says, Raffi continues to be a great character, cleverly written and perfectly portrayed. See, that's the opposite impression that Jim had earlier. Like, it's funny how everything is subjective. One man's trash is another man's treasure, so to speak. I found the Rios and Agnes scenes curious. I'm not sure how I feel about Rios taking advantage of Agnes like that. She hesitated. She consented. Nothing truly bad here, but it seemed odd. I had similar feelings about it. Agnes's inability to look Picard in the eye when she was explaining Bruce's death said a lot. This is something that I think will haunt her, and no amount of romping with Rios is going to fix that. I would agree with that as well. One question, Hugh said, now our queen is a Romulan. What was meant by that? Is the new Borg queen an assimilated Romulan, or is it just that the Reclamation Project is under Romulan control? Thanks. I think we answered that already, and maybe this was the question that I was thinking of that came in. But yeah, it just means that they are under Romulan control. They're not free to leave. They're like prisoners on that ship, I think, or whatever you want to call it, the artifact. The former ship. And for that matter, is it still a ship? Could it function as a ship? Could this end up with this artifact just flying away?
I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe. I mean, the spatial trajectory worked.
That's true. All right. So we got one more bit of feedback that came in late. It actually came in while we were recording. So we just happened to notice it and we got it in time. And that's from Robert.
All right, he says, Star Trek Picard, thank goodness for episode 106. I didn't get a chance to write about my disappointment in last week's show. Overall, I give episode 105, Pimps and Pirates, a 4.5 phony eye patches out of 10. Wow, that's harsh.
Wow.
I found the episode to be ridiculous, obnoxious, and tedious, along with slow and predictable. The shining moment was Picard's conversation with 7 of 9 about regaining their lost humanity.
Okay, so I want to ask about this. So, Robert, and, we just got this in, so I didn't, really didn't get a chance to process this. So, you even thought that, like, her shooting Bajazzo was predictable? That was predictable too? Like, so, I don't know. Ridiculous, I can get. Obnoxious, yes, I get. So, some of it, I get what you mean, but I didn't think it was predictable. I didn't find it slow either, so.
Me either.
Teach is his own, that's, if that's the way he felt, then that's, how he felt, but.
Yep. All right. He goes on to say, in fact, after the show ended and I had started to jot down some notes, it dawned on me that we didn't see anything about Soji and Narek, and I realized that I didn't miss it. A little consideration later, I discovered a more worrisome conclusion. I didn't care. For as much as I had developed some concern over Daj in episode 101, I found that I had invested very little in Soji, and even less so in Narek. As for Narissa and Narek's semi-incestuous relationship, the sooner that is jettisoned out the nearest airlock, the better. And then we get episode 106, and it's everything I could hope for in this show. We find that Picard's personal trauma at being assimilated is hardly healed at all, and it's lurking just under his conscious thought, waiting to erupt. We see Dr. Girardi's betrayal tormenting her almost to distraction, so she needs to find a way to be distracted, and Soji is finally beginning to realize who and what she is. But best of all, we have the show turning something that was commonly accepted, the Borg as villains, into something unexpected, the Borg as victims. And that new view, that distillation through a prism, that fractured reflection is when Star Trek is at its best, and this episode delivered in spades. The show started strong, but for me at least, it has been slipping, but I'm not sure why. Does it need action? No, we have that. Drama? Have that too. Plot twists? Got 'em. So I can't quite put my finger on what the or my problem is. One thing I did notice, though, the episodes have been in the 42 to 45 minute range, except for episode 106 being 54 minutes. Maybe 10 to 14 minutes more of plot/character development is what is needed. Thoughts? Till next time, your friend Bob. I kind of tend to agree with that. We talked about it a little bit. There's something also for me that I'm not quite sure what it is either, that I've been kind of feeling was not all the way I wanted it to be.
Yeah, a lot of the stories seem like they could have been longer.
Or better.
Wow. And I think that the extra 10 minutes or so probably made a difference. It certainly made it seem a lot more epic, I think. And certain story elements not rushed. Like if this episode had been 10 minutes, had been 44 minutes instead of 54 minutes, I think that there would have been like certain elements of like the Soji, Narek story, and for that matter, Picard being on the cube, that would have been lost. And I think that by making it a longer episode, I think it would have been, it was the right choice. And I wonder how many other things were on the floor from the first 5,
I don't know, but I honestly wish they would have made those first 3 episodes just be the first 2. It's a misstep that they've, I don't know, to me that's a misstep that they've taken a while to recover from.
All right, so our own notes. Do you have anything?
Yes. What do you think Agnes hoped to gain by going in as a scientist? Because she was sure pushing that real hard.
I think she wanted to go in and kill Soji.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think. And the fact that she couldn't, kind of left her beside herself. But I think that was her plan. She was going to go in there. That's why when she got a hold of Maddox, she was going to go there and kill Maddox. And if she had gotten a hold of Soji, and I think if they ended up back in the ship, she would have tried to kill Soji. So I think that's probably part of it. So
yeah,
that's
what I was thinking. But I was like, man, she went at that real, like, A, unexpectedly, and B, hard.
Yeah. Do you think Narek's true name is really Rayen, or is that another lie?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure. See, I just don't know anything about him.
Except the tooth.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. But, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what he told her that was true and what he told her to just get her to trust him, honestly. And I don't know if that was one of the things. I mean, I guess it depends on how good of a liar he is, because he could have just made something up and told her, this is my name. And because she said, your true name is the name you give to your, the one you give your heart to or whatever. So he could have just been doing that to get her to trust him. Or maybe he did tell her his true name, expecting that he would kill her. So it didn't matter.
And that whole thing reminded me of Calypso. Because if you remember Kraft, it was a similar kind of thing where his lover, he said on his planet, the lover gives the person's true name or something like that. So it seemed oddly similar. And of course, Chabon wrote that short trek. So
yeah.
You got anything else?
Honestly, when they were in the meditation room and she was walking through that maze, it really reminded me of this series of books written by Roger Zelazny called The Chronicles of Amber, where these the central characters can walk this pattern which can allow them to travel freely through these shadow worlds that are reflected from the real world and or restore memory.
Do you know what it reminded me of?
What's that?
It reminded me of Carol going into that one room in Terminus on The Walking Dead No Sanctuary, and she sees that room that they've got where there's a bunch of candles on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
It was similar to that, but
yeah,
I don't know. That's what I thought of, although it symbolically has a much different meaning.
Yeah.
Although the termites were very secretive too.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think the girl Soji looked like Soji. I know some people thought that she looked just like Soji. I did not. Their facial, like, bone structure didn't look at all the same. Like, she had, like, big eyes, whereas Issa Briona's, she has prominent eyes, but they're, like, more sunken, whereas the girl's eyes were more, like, out.
Protruding
A bit, yes.
They also had different eye color, so
that too. So anyway, I didn't buy that part. And why does Soji look like wood, like Pinocchio?
It's that cognitive dissonance thing. I was
a
also
puppet.
thinking, yeah, exactly. The last time he had to remove her boots, they did something stupid.
I noticed that she had extremely long boots.
That's not unusual.
Yeah, well, and that's a Star Trek thing. I'll have these, like, boots that are, like, 32 inches long or something.
They're just knee highs.
I don't know. They look really long. I don't know. For me, anything that's more than like a foot or a basketball height shoe is long.
Ankle boots, in
Ankle
other
boots.
words.
Okay,
Oh.
sure. I'm not
shaking my head at you.
I am not a boot wearing person. I have
Well, there are ankle boots, there are calf high boots, there are knee high boots, and there are thigh high boots.
and I wear no boots. So
I wear boots.
okay.
I like boots. I have both ankle boots and calf high boots.
I have trouble getting boots to fit properly, so I don't tend to wear them.
I understand.
All right, let's go to Shipwide Announcements. This week's episode of The Ready Room featured Jerry Ryan, which is kind of funny because she wasn't in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a fan, I would watch that episode. That's all I'll say.
Yep.
Some sad news. This was came out today, an article from People magazine. Kenneth Mitchell, who those of you that watched Star Trek Discovery would, of course, know that name. He was known to play the three prominent Klingons on the show at various times. He first played Cole, and then he played Cole's father, Cole Shaw, and then he played Tenavik, who was Ash Tyler and Laurel's son. Announced today in that article that he has been diagnosed with ALS. And that's Lou Gehrig's disease, they call it, or used to call it a lot. He received the diagnosis in August of 2018. I would assume it was probably around the time that he was shooting Discovery Season 2, that when he played Tenavik, it was probably shot around that time. And he's been, I don't know if he's been confined to the wheelchair, but he's using like a wheelchair slash scooter, because he's pictured with it since last October. So I'm really sorry to hear that. Apparently he was also in the series Nancy Drew, and he, I guess, is leaving that show because
Imagine.
yeah. So I mean, it's not like it used to be in the past. Of course, if you had Lou Gehrig's disease, you didn't live very long. Like, of course, Stephen Hawking is a good example. He lived a long time with the disease, but he's got a wife and kids, and that's sad to see that. But one really good thing about the article I'll say, is that has a really positive outlook about it, and he is trying to, look things in a positive way. Like he's making, now that he's, has this diagnosis, he's trying to spend time with his family and make the most of the time that he has. So I gotta hand it to him, and hopefully, he'll live with the disease for many years. I know, he's gonna have some difficult years ahead of him, but sad to see that happen. But and I know he was a big fan favorite. He's been, very like presence at conventions and on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. So he's been a fan favorite. So I'm really sorry to hear that he's been diagnosed with this, but hopefully he can make some good come out of it, or at least, have some times left. So Walter Koenig gave an interesting interview this week on salon.com. And the title of it was Star Trek is a welcome respite from the infamy of the Trump administration. So I guess we know what he thinks of Trump. I didn't really get a chance to read the article in detail, but I did hear some other people talking about it, and I kind of skimmed through it. But he had some interesting things to say, especially about like how Star Trek is kind of needed right now. So I thought that was good. Paired analytics, Star Trek Picard did get on the paired analytics for this week. It was 7th in the digitals with for almost 50 million impressions, whatever that means. And it was, I don't know where this came from, but it was taken down. But we saw a little new title graphic for Star Trek Discovery, not of the credits, but just like a banner. But then it got taken down. But it's kind of interesting, but it's with Burnham holding a tattered Federation flag with the rest of the main characters kind of like look like they're on a summit somewhere.
Yep.
That's it for news and whatnot. So Ruthie, why don't you tell people how to contact us?
Alrighty. If you want to submit your feedback or connect with us, give us your theories. Go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit text or audio. You can call us at 216-232-6146. Or, okay, after that, you can send us an email. The email address is picardcast@talkthroughmedia.com. You can also post in our designated episode thread in our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. Or you can tweet us at Picardcast, and we will try and get your feedback from there.
Yeah, it's not always easy.
And we're not always the best at it.
No.
Sorry.
A great way you can support us is to share our tweets on Twitter and Facebook. And the Facebook group, those posts are in a private group, but anything that we post, like when our episodes are out, we'll post them at facebook.com/talkthroughmedia. So the first thing I want every one of you to do that's on Facebook is to go to that page, facebook.com/talkthroughmedia, and like it. Okay? Please do that right now. Stop listening to the podcast and go do that. Thank you. Because if you do that, you'll get notified when we post something there, and you can help us out by sharing those posts. Like, hey, we got a new episode out. Share it. That'll help us get seen by more people, and they'll listen and tell 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on. And another thing you could do there is leave us a review there. So a lot of people, we always hear, oh, we don't have Apple Podcasts. Well, you can leave us a review there. So, because you can't do that on a Facebook group, but you can do it on a page. So help us out. Leave us a review. Like Edwin from Arizona, who left us a review on the Talk Through Media page. He said, "This is a great place to talk Star Trek and feel comfortable and part of a community. Highly recommend it." So thank you, Edwin.
Yes,
and
thanks. That's awesome.
You too can do that for us there. So like and recommend us. And if you do have Apple Podcasts, you can help us out with a 5-star rating review. And if you don't use Apple Podcasts, another option is Podchaser. Podchaser is being added to many different podcast apps. If you can set up an account at podchaser.com, like I know James, the Augmented Sailor, did for us. Anyway, you go in there. You can leave us a rating review. You can even rate episodes there. So that's a great thing. And of course, our Patreon, that's at patreon.com/Brian and Ruthie. We just released earlier this week our call-in show that we recorded Saturday, February 22nd. And on that call, Ruthie, of course, talked about her recent trip to chat with the Shat. Well, she didn't get to chat with Shatner, but she got to see him appear during a screening of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So we get to talk about that. We talked about the first 5 episodes of Picard, and I talked in a non-spoiler way about Star Trek Picard, The Last Best Hope. So hopefully Ruthie will finish that one and we'll talk about it another time. But I would love to talk about that novel because there's so many things I would love to talk about, but I don't, every time I go to talk about it, nobody's read it. So it's really good. I've said that 50 times last week. So anyway, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, James Robbins, Lawrence Todd, Fred Petrie, Clint McCollum, Kyle McAdams, Kim Vogel, Brian Shiro, Christoph Leckleitner, Jeff Bayako, and Lee Radke. Subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already done so. And if you watch Star Trek Discovery, the Star Trek Discovery podcast contains both the Star Trek Discovery podcast episodes and the Star Trek Picard cast episodes. So good thing to do would be to sign up there. And also on the network, The Walking Dead Talk Through is back. I am not on it because of these 3-hour episodes. But anyway, so I'm kind of taking a break, but Mark and Kyle are taking the show over for now, and maybe I'll be back after Picard's done, but at least for now, that's how I'm still leaving feedback, but that's about it, and ratings, because I can't give ratings here.
Ha ha ha.
Season 1, episode 7, titled, okay, so on the Walking Dead Talk Through, I gave ratings all the time. Ruthie hated it.
I didn't hate it. I just slept through them.
Hated it. Okay. Total disinterest. So
that's right.
Yes.
Hatred implies some kind of desire, whereas I had none.
Yes.
I was completely apathetic.
It's very true. Anyway, the next episode, season 1, episode 7. I hope I say this correctly. Nepenthe. I think that's how I heard it.
I think so too, but that word was said super quick, and I didn't catch it the first time around.
Yeah. Reminds me of...
I caught it the second episode, or the second time I watched the episode. I was like, that's what he said.
The main thing it reminds me of is Rurapente. Where, of course, Kirk and McCoy get sentenced to hard labor on Rurapente. And I think that was mentioned in Discovery, too. Anyway, written by We Don't Know, directed by We Don't Know, and we don't have a description, but I pulled it from his feedback earlier because it was spoilery. James says this: can't wait to see Riker and Troy next week. See why I pulled it? Also, what's up with the person in the elf-like cloak in the previews? At first, I was like, maybe it's Elnor, but he's back at the artifact, and the figure looked feminine. 7 returning? Can't wait to see.
No audio feedback from Fred this week, which makes us really sad. We do want to hear your voice, Fred.
Yes.
So send us some feedback. Don't be shy.
And if you missed Fred, let him know on the Facebook group. And until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm Ruthie.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.